The great trade station floated like a metal giant at the edge of known space. Thousands of ships from every corner of the galaxy came and went every day. The station was filled with voices, colors, smells, and faces of many species. To walk through its wide halls was to see the galaxy itself gathered in one place. A soldier of the tall and strong Doros species walked through the station with pride. She was more than 7 feet tall, her frame powerful and her skin marked with the faint lines of old battles. Her people were respected as warriors, and she carried herself with the confidence of one who had never been bested. She looked at the smaller creatures of the station as if they were children, pretending to be soldiers. That was when she first saw a human. He was standing near a supply stall, speaking with the trader. His name, Thorin did not know it yet, was Tom. Compared to her people, he was small, not much more than 6 feet tall, with a lean build that looked fragile in her eyes. His skin was pale compared to her dark gray, and his simple clothes carried no armor, no weapons. To Rin, he looked like a farmer who had wandered into the largest market of the stars. Rin stopped, tilting her head as she looked at him. She had heard whispers of humans, but had never met one before. They were new to the stars, new to war, new to the dangers that shaped strong species. She laughed aloud, her voice carrying over the hum of the station. "Is that one truly a fighter?" she said to the merchant beside her. "Look at him, small arms, thin legs. I wonder how such a creature survives outside his home world." The merchant chuckled, but Tom heard the words. He turned, his eyes meeting hers. There was no anger in his face, no shame either. He simply looked at her with calm eyes, then gave a small smile as if her laughter meant little. Ren expected him to defend himself, to argue, to shout back, as many other species would when insulted. But Tom said nothing. He nodded politely, finished his trade, and walked away. That silence unsettled her more than an argument would have. Ren followed with her eyes as he moved through the crowd. His steps were steady, unhurried, and he carried his pack with ease. She found herself frowning. Small as he was, he did not move like the weak one she had mocked before. Later, in the common hall of the station, she saw him again. A group of workers were unloading heavy crates, supplies from distant worlds. One of the workers dropped a container, and Tom stepped forward to help. He lifted one end with care, his muscles straining but not giving out. Ren folded her arms, amused. "You will break yourself, little human," she called across the hall. "Leave heavy work to those who are made for it." Again Tom looked at her. His face showed no anger. Instead, he gave a small shrug, as if to say the work was not beyond him. Then he returned to lifting with the workers, not stopping until the last crate was in place. That night, Ren sat with her squad at the warriors' table, speaking of battles and training. Yet her mind wandered back to the human. She spoke of him to her companions, and they laughed as she had laughed. One of them said, "They are too small, too weak. Their kind will not last long beyond their world." Ren nodded but felt a small doubt within her. Why had he not broken under her words? Why had he carried the weight without quitting? It was nothing compared to what her people could do, but there had been something in his quiet strength that stayed with her. The next day, as she walked through the docking bay, she saw Tom again. This time he was speaking with officers about a mission. Ren's ears caught words of interest. The mission was to the nearby asteroid field to move supplies across unstable ground. It would take days, perhaps weeks, of hard labor. She stepped closer, listening as one of the officers questioned the human. "You understand this work is not for the weak. The ground is rough, the load's heavy. Many will not last." Tom only answered with a steady voice. "I understand." Ren could not help but laugh again. "You will not last a day," she said, stepping forward. "Your body is too small. You will fall behind before the first sun sets." Others in the bay laughed with her, yet Tom only gave the same small smile as before. He looked at her, calm and quiet, and then turned back to the officer. "I will be there," he said simply. That night Ren lay awake in her bunk. For the first time in many years, she felt curious. The human was small, yes, but his eyes carried something she could not name. He did not boast like others, did not shout back when mocked, did not bend when others laughed. Instead, he carried himself as if his size did not matter at all. She thought of his calm smile and the quiet way he had said he would join the mission. Something inside her wondered if she had judged him too quickly. But she pushed the thought aside and told herself he would fail. He had to fail, because if he did not, then she would have to question everything she believed about strength. The trade station was never quiet. The sound of voices, the clang of metal, and the constant hum of ships filled every corner. But in the docking bay, a new energy moved through the air. Crews gathered, speaking in low tones about the asteroid mission. Supplies had to be carried across broken rocks, and only the strongest or most enduring would succeed. It was not a mission for the weak. Ren stood among her squad, tall and proud. Her people, the Doro, were always chosen for hard labor and dangerous tasks. They were bred for strength, and she expected nothing less than to be picked again. She crossed her arms, her sharp eyes scanning the hall. That was when she saw him, Tom, the human. He was speaking with the mission officer, the same one she had overheard before. His voice was calm, almost too calm for what was being asked of him. The officer explained the task once more. You will be part of a team, the officer said. Each of you must carry your share of the supplies. The field is unstable. You will face low gravity, sharp rocks, and long hours. This is not a simple task. I understand. Tom replied, his tone steady. Ren could not hold back her laughter. She stepped closer, her heavy boots echoing in the hall. He understands nothing, she said to the officer. Look at him. His body is too small. His arms too thin. He will drop the first crate he touches. Let my people take the work instead. We will not waste time dragging him back when he fails. Several others laughed with her, but Tom did not flinch. He turned his head and met her gaze. His eyes were calm, without anger or pride. For the second time, he gave the same small smile and said nothing. He simply signed his name to the mission list and stepped aside. That silence pressed against her pride. Why did he never answer? Why did he not shout back? Ren felt heat rise in her chest, not from anger, but from something she could not name. When the officer called for the volunteers to line up, Tom stood among them. He looked out of place beside the tall and powerful figures of other species. Some carried broad shoulders, some had forearms, and some had armored skin. Tom had none of these. He stood as a simple man, his pack light, his stance steady. Ren watched closely. She wanted to see him fail, wanted to prove that her laughter had been right. And yet, deep inside, she felt the beginning of doubt. The first test began in the docking bay itself. Crates of metal and fuel had to be carried into the shuttle. Each volunteer took a turn, showing what they could lift. Ren stepped forward first. She bent low, grasped the handles of a crate, and lifted it high with ease. Her people clapped their fists against their chests, proud of her show of strength. Then it was Tom's turn. The crate before him was half the size of hers. Some laughed. Already, saying the officer had spared him, Tom bent, wrapped his arms round the crate, and lifted. His arms shook for a moment, but then his movement grew steady. Step by step, he carried it into the shuttle, his face calm, his breathing slow. He placed it down with care, then walked back for another. Ren narrowed her eyes. The crate was lighter than hers, yes, but he had carried it without stopping. Many weaker species would have stumbled. He had not. The officer nodded. You are ready, he said. The words echoed in Ren's head. Ready? The human was ready? She clenched her fists, but said nothing. When the day of departure came, the volunteers gathered at the airlock. Each carried a pack of supplies strapped to their backs. Ren adjusted her straps with ease, her broad shoulders built for such weight. She glanced at Tom. His pack was smaller, but it looked heavy on his lean frame. She smirked. Certain that the field would break him, the shuttle launched, carrying them through the black sea of stars. Out the window, the asteroid field came into view. Jagged rocks floated in endless numbers, drifting slowly but dangerously close to one another. Landing among them was difficult, but the shuttle touched down on a wide, flat surface. Teams of 3, the officer ordered. Each group will carry supplies across the rocks to the outpost on the far side. Pace yourselves. This will not be finished in a single day. Rin was placed in a group with Tom and another alien named Bren, a tall creature with 4 arms and bronze skin. She felt her pride rise. Surely, with such strength beside her, she would not be the one to fail. And surely, the human would prove to be the weakest. They began their work. The first stretch was simple. They carried crates across the flat rock, setting them down in stacks for later pickup. Removed quickly, her strength making the load feel light. Bren carried 2 crates at once, his 4 arms making him seem unstoppable. Tom carried only 1 crate, smaller than theirs, but his steps never slowed. Hours passed. The sun shifted behind the rocks, and shadows grew long. Sweat gathered on Rin's brow. But she pressed on. She glanced at Tom again and again, waiting for him to stumble, to complain, to fall behind. But each time she looked, he was there, steady as before. By nightfall, they had carried more than she expected. Rin sat heavily on a rock, stretching her aching arms. Bren groaned, lowering himself to the ground with his 4 arms trembling. But Tom did not sit. He placed his last crate in the pile and stood quietly, his chest rising and falling in calm rhythm. His face showed no anger, no pride, only quiet focus. Rin stared at him in silence. Something inside her twisted. She had laughed at him, mocked his size, called him weak. Yet here he stood, not broken, not tired, while even she felt the first weight of exhaustion. That night, as they made camp among the rocks, Rin lay awake. She turned her head toward Tom, who sat near the fire, calmly checking the straps of his pack. His eyes reflected the firelight, calm and steady. For the first time, Rin felt something new. Not anger, not laughter, but curiosity. What kind of creature did not tire when even the strong began to falter? The first morning on the asteroid field was cold and sharp. The rocks stretched in every direction, jagged like broken teeth. The outpost they had to supply was far, hidden beyond the uneven ground and the endless field of stone. The air was thin, the gravity low, and every step felt strange. Rin woke early, her strong body already stiff from the first day's labor. She rubbed her arms and looked around the small camp. Bren was still snoring, his 4 arms folded across his chest. But Tom was already awake. He sat on a flat rock, his pack open as he quietly checked his supplies. His movements were calm, not rushed. He looked like someone who had done this 100 times before. Rin frowned. She did not like how steady he always seemed. She wanted to see him break, to see her laughter proven true. She told herself it was only a matter of time. When the signal to begin was given, the 3 of them strapped on their packs again. Each carried crates bound with ropes, supplies meant for the outpost. Bren grunted as he lifted 2 crates at once, proud to show his strength. Rin took 1 heavy load, her arms flexing with power. Tom lifted a smaller crate, pulling the straps tight across his shoulders. The path was hard from the beginning. The ground was uneven, the rocks sharp and loose. With low gravity, every step had to be careful. One wrong move could send a person sliding down into the cracks between the stones. Rin moved fast at first, her strength carrying her across the rocks. She laughed as Bren struggled with his heavy double load, though his pride kept him from asking for help. Tom, however, did not rush. He walked with even steps, keeping his balance steady. He never stumbled, never hurried. He looked like a man who had learned patience long ago. By midday, Rin began to feel the ache in her back. She shifted the crate from one arm to the other, annoyed at the dull burn in her muscles. She glanced behind her. Bren was sweating heavily, his forearms trembling from the weight. But Tom was still walking, still carrying, still steady. His face showed no strain, only quiet focus. Rin clenched her teeth. "You carry less," she told him, her voice sharp. "That is why you are not tired. When the load is light, the walk is easy." Tom looked at her, his calm eyes meeting hers. "The walk is long," he said softly. "It is not about today. It is about every day, Ren scowled. His words made no sense to her. Strength was strength. If you were strong, you carried more. That was the way of her people. The hours dragged on. The sun above shifted across the rocks, turning shadows long and cold. By the time they reached the next checkpoint, Ren dropped her crate with a heavy thud. Her arms ached, and her legs felt heavy. Bren collapsed beside his load, his chest heaving as he gasped for air. Tom set down his crate with care, wiping sweat from his brow. His breathing was deep but steady. He sat quietly, drinking a small sip of water, and then began preparing. For the next stretch, Ren's pride burned inside her. She was taller, stronger, and built for war. How could the small human still move so calmly when she herself felt her body grow tired? She told herself it was luck. Tomorrow, he would fall. The second day was worse. The path grew steeper, the rocks sharper, the gaps between them wider. Ren carried another heavy crate, but each step made her muscles scream. She slipped once, nearly dropping her load, and Bren had to grab her arm to keep her from sliding. Tom helped too. He set down his crate and reached out, steadying her with one firm grip. His hand was smaller than hers, but strong. She pulled away quickly, embarrassed. I did not need help, she snapped. Tom only nodded, picked up his crate again, and continued walking. The silence made her angrier than any insult would have. Why did he never fight back? Why did he never defend himself? With words, each day she mocked him, laughed at his size, and waited for him to fail. Yet each day he carried his load, step by step, without complaint. By the third day, Bren could no longer carry 2 crates. His arms shook too much, and he dropped one on the ground with a loud crash. Ren laughed at him. Though her own strength was fading, she could still carry her load, but every muscle in her body throbbed. Tom, however, carried the same small crate as before. His pace never changed. He moved like the ticking of a clock, steady, certain, endless. When Bren dropped behind, Tom carried his own crate ahead, then walked back to help with the other. He did not brag, did not speak of it, only lifted and carried, as if the work was simple. That night, as the 3 of them sat by the fire, Ren kept her eyes on Tom. Bren had fallen asleep quickly, too tired to eat, but Tom sat quietly, eating. Slowly, his eyes on the fire. His breathing was calm, even after a long day. Ren wanted to ask him how he did it. She wanted to know why he never seemed to break. But her pride kept her silent. She only watched him, her thoughts turning like restless waves. When she lay down to sleep, her arms ached, her legs burned, and her pride felt heavier than the crates she carried. For the first time in her life, Ren wondered if strength was not the same as power. For the first time, she wondered if her laughter had been wrong. The human did not look strong, but he did not tire, and that, she realized with a small shiver, might be a strength greater than her own. The 4th day on the asteroid field began with a low wind that whistled between the jagged rocks. The sky above was dark, and the thin light of the distant sun painted long shadows across the ground. The journey was only halfway done, but already the weight of the mission pressed on everyone. Ren woke with her body sore from head to toe. Every muscle ached, and her back throbbed from carrying crates that seemed heavier with each passing hour. She sat up slowly, groaning as she stretched. Her arms, Bren was worse. His 4 arms twitched from exhaustion, and he lay on the ground breathing heavily before the day had even begun. And then there was Tom. The human was awake before either of them, as always. He moved with quiet care, rolling up the thin blanket he had used, checking the ropes of his pack, and preparing without complaint. His face showed signs of effort, his hair damp with sweat, his clothes dusty from the rocks, but his eyes were calm, steady as ever. Ren scowled. She wanted to see him break. She wanted to see him drop his crate and admit she had been right. But every time she thought he might stumble, he kept moving, step after step, without fail. When the officer gave the order to move, the 3 of them strapped on their loads again. Ren carried a heavy crate of tools, Bren took a smaller one, and Tom lifted his usual supply. The first stretch was steep. The rocks rose higher, and the ground tilted dangerously. Each step had to be taken with care. Bren groaned with every move, his arms trembling under the weight. Ren's legs burned, her breath came faster, and she bit her lip to hide her struggle. But when she looked back, Tom was still there, walking at the same steady pace. His breathing was even, his eyes fixed on the path ahead. Hours passed, the sun climbed higher, but its weak light gave little warmth. Ren's arms shook as she set down her crate at the next checkpoint. She fell to her knees, breathing hard, her pride wounded by the simple truth she was struggling, and the human was not. Tom placed his crate beside hers and straightened slowly. He took a deep breath, wiped the sweat from his brow, and then looked back at the path they had crossed. For the first time, Ren noticed something in his face, not pride, not arrogance, but focus, as if he were measuring the distance left in his mind. Bren collapsed beside them, gasping. "I cannot carry this tomorrow," he said between breaths. "It is too much." Ren wanted to tell him to stand, to keep moving, to act like a warrior. But when she opened her mouth, the words died, because deep inside, she felt the same. That night, the campfire burned low, and the cold crept close. Ren sat with her arms wrapped around her knees, staring at the flames. She could not stop thinking of the human his small body had carried him farther than her tall frame and Bren's forearms. She had laughed at him, called him weak, mocked his size. Yet now, as she rubbed the ache from her shoulders, she knew the truth: he was not weak at all. She finally spoke, her voice low. "Human," she said. Tom looked up from where he was adjusting the straps of his pack. "Yes," Ren frowned, unsure of her own words. "Why do you not tire?" she asked. "You are smaller than us. You carry less than us. But still, you move as if the journey has no end. Why?" Tom was silent for a long moment. He looked at the fire, his eyes reflecting the flickering light. Then he spoke, his voice calm and steady. "My people are not the strongest," he said. "We are not the fastest, not the biggest, not the fiercest, but we are built to keep going. On my world, long ago, we chased animals across open ground. We did not catch them with speed. We caught them by running until they could not run anymore. That is what humans are. We do not stop. We do not give up. We move until the end comes." Ren stared at him. His words made little sense to her. Her people fought with strength, not patience. Yet something in his voice struck deep inside her. He was not boasting. He was not mocking. He was only telling the truth. The next morning, when they began again, Ren watched him more closely. Bren stumbled often, his arms shaking too much to carry even one crate without help. Ren herself felt weaker with each hour. But Tom moved like the steady rhythm of a drum, never too fast, never too slow, always forward. By the end of the day, Ren dropped her crate with a groan, her legs refusing to move another step. Bren had already collapsed, unable to rise. But Tom stood over them, his face lined with sweat, but his eyes sharp and alive. He looked down at the two of them, breathing deeply but steady, as if he could keep going for hours more. For the first time, Ren felt shame. She had judged him wrongly. She had laughed at his size and mocked his strength. But here, in the endless field of stone, she saw the truth. Tom was not weak. He was strong in a way she had never understood. That night, as she lay under the stars, Ren whispered to herself, though no one could hear, "I was wrong." And for the first time in her life, the proud warrior of the Doro people admitted that strength was not only in muscles, not only in size, but in the will to never stop. The human had taught her that without a single insult, without a single boast, only by walking, only by enduring, only by refusing to fall. And Ren knew then that the turning point had come. She no longer wanted to laugh at him. She wanted to learn from him. The fifth day on the asteroid field began with an eerie calm. The sun barely warmed the jagged rocks, and the cold wind swept across the surface like a living thing. The path to the outpost grew more difficult with each step. Cracks widened in the rocks, sharp edges threatened every misstep, and the low gravity made balancing even more challenging. Ren stretched her sore muscles, trying to prepare herself. Her arms ached, her legs felt heavy, and her breathing came in short bursts. She had survived tougher challenges before, but nothing had tested her endurance like this. She glanced at Bren, who was already grimacing at the thought of another day's work. And then she saw Tom. As always, he was awake before anyone else. His pack was ready. His steps careful but certain. His movements were slow enough to conserve energy, yet steady enough to keep pace with the heavier, stronger workers. Ren felt a mix of frustration and awe when the officers signaled the start. The volunteers lifted their crates. Ren's shoulders strained under the heavy load. Bren immediately grumbled, carrying as best he could. Tom lifted his usual crate, no larger than the ones he had carried since day one. But instead of keeping to himself, he walked alongside Bren and Ren, observing their movements. By mid-morning, the first signs of fatigue were evident. Bren's forearms trembled with exhaustion, and he dropped one of his crates. Ren's muscles screamed at her to rest, and she barely managed to place her crate on the uneven rock surface. She glanced at Tom, certain that even he would begin to falter. But he did not. Instead, Tom did something Ren had not expected, seeing Bren struggle. He carefully lifted part of the extra load, adjusting his pace to match the taller alien. His movements were efficient, precise, and calm. He never slowed, never complained, never drew attention to himself. Ren's jaw tightened. She had mocked him for his size, dismissed his potential, and yet here he was, helping others while carrying his own weight. He was teaching her something she had not known before. That true strength was not in being the biggest or the fastest, but in never stopping, in helping others along the way, and in enduring when others could not. The sun climbed higher, yet the three of them moved steadily. Ren's pride made her resist accepting help, but she could not ignore the human's efficiency. With every step, he carried not just his crate but a bit of Bren's load as well, adjusting without hesitation. By the afternoon, more volunteers had fallen behind. Some rested. Some collapsed entirely, unable to continue. Ren's muscles burned as she dragged herself forward, but when she looked at Tom, he was still walking, still lifting, still helping others. His calm determination seemed to radiate through the group, quietly encouraging everyone who could still move. Ren could no longer hide her respect. She had always believed that strength meant being taller, stronger, or faster. But here, in the endless field of jagged rocks, she saw a different kind of power, one that required patience, endurance, and the quiet will to continue even when the body screamed to stop. Human. Ren called out quietly during a short break. How do you keep going like this? Tom looked at her, sweat dripping from his brow, but his eyes were steady. We keep going, he said simply. We do not stop. Not because we are stronger, not because we are faster, but because stopping is not an option. If you continue, you survive. If you stop, you fail. Ren nodded slowly, absorbing his words. For the first time, she understood that strength was more than muscle. She realized that her people, though mighty and proud, could not match the human. In endurance, when the team resumed their path, Ren noticed more volunteers looking at Tom with surprise. Some were inspired by his quiet strength. Following his careful yet steady pace, others were frustrated, realizing their own limitations. In comparison, Bren, despite his pride, admitted silently that Tom's endurance was remarkable. Ren had never seen anyone like him. Every step he took was measured and controlled, yet tireless. When one of the weaker volunteers stumbled, Tom adjusted his own pace to support them. When a crate tipped dangerously, he corrected it without pause. The human moved through the field not as someone small and weak, but as someone who could endure anything the rocks, the sun, or the wind could throw at him. By evening, the group reached a difficult ridge. The path was steep, loose rocks sliding under each step. Ren felt her muscles scream in protest, and she nearly lost her balance more than once. Bren struggled behind her, complaining openly about the effort. Tom, however, moved carefully, his crate steady on his back. He reached the ridge, then paused, turning back to help the others up. His small hands and lean body lifted and guided, making the task easier for everyone. The patience and steady effort he showed was unlike anything Ren had seen in her life. That night, as they set up camp among jagged stones, Ren sat by the fire, her body exhausted but her mind racing. She had laughed at the human for his size, mocked his small frame, and expected him to fail. But now, after days of observation, she realized she had been wrong. Tom was not weak. He was not flashy or loud. He did not boast or brag. But he possessed something stronger than muscle and endurance that could carry him farther than any warrior, a determination that outlasted pride, and a calm patience that allowed him to help others while completing the task himself. Ren stared at him across the fire. He was quietly tending to his supplies, checking the ropes, and preparing for the next day. Even now, he showed no sign of fatigue beyond the normal wear of work. The warrior inside Ren felt something near respect. For the first time, she wanted to learn from him. She wanted to understand how someone so small could outlast the tallest, strongest members of her own species. The lesson was clear. Endurance was a power her people could not fully comprehend. It was quiet, invisible, but unstoppable. As she lay down under the stars, Ren whispered to herself, I must learn from him. Humans are not weak. They endure, and endurance is true strength. For the first time, she saw the human not as someone to mock, but as a teacher. Tom's quiet determination had changed something inside her. She had laughed at him, doubted him, and underestimated him. Now she knew better. Humans may look small, but they possess a strength that lasts far beyond the power of any other species. And Ren understood that this lesson was only the beginning. The seventh day of the mission began like every other, cold, quiet, and sharp with the scent of dust and stone. The asteroid field stretched endlessly before them, jagged rocks rising like mountains and dips forming dangerous gaps. The path to the outpost was long, but by now, the team had learned the rhythm of the journey. Ren stood beside Tom, adjusting the straps of her heavy crate. Her arms ached. Her legs trembled slightly, but her mind was clearer than it had been for days. She no longer laughed at the human. She no longer doubted him. Instead, she felt respect deep, silent, and unshakable. Brent struggled behind them, his forearms shaking under the weight he carried. He grunted, tired from constant effort. Yet he kept moving, spurred on by Tom's example. Tom had shown them that even when the body grows weak, the mind and will can keep going. Human, Ren said quietly, careful not to let her tone sound mocking. Tom glanced at her, his calm expression unchanged. Yes, he asked simply. You keep going. She said slowly, even when everyone else is tired, even when I am tired. How do you do it? Tom did not smile, nor did he boast. He only looked at her steadily. We do not stop because stopping is easy. Stopping is weakness. We move forward because the work must be done, because others depend on us, because giving up is not an option. Ren felt the weight of his words. Her people were proud, yes, but pride alone could not endure for days like this. Tom's kind of strength, the quiet, unyielding endurance was something she had never seen before. As they began the trek across the next stretch, the path grew narrower. Loose rocks shifted beneath their feet, forcing careful steps. Ren struggled to keep her balance, and Brent stumbled, nearly dropping his load. Tom, as always, moved steadily, watching for hazards and adjusting his pace for the others. When Brent nearly slipped into a narrow crack, Tom reached out, steadying him. His small frame and calm hands managed what Ren could not, holding Brent firmly. While he regained balance, Ren swallowed a quiet exclamation of surprise. She had assumed her own strength was unmatched, but here was a human, smaller than any of them, performing feats of endurance and precision that rivaled her best efforts. By the afternoon, the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the rocks. The team had crossed treacherous ground that would have slowed many experienced warriors. Ren's arms ached, her back felt sore, yet she realized something remarkable. She was still moving, and it was because of the example Tom had set. She glanced at him, carrying his crate with steady determination, then looking back to help Brent and the others. His calm patience and focus had kept them all moving, even in the most difficult conditions. Ren found herself thinking differently now. She had mocked him, laughed at his size, and doubted his ability. But every action Tom had taken proved her wrong. He was small, yes, but his endurance, patience, and quiet strength made him one of the most powerful members of the team. When the final stretch appeared a steep slope leading directly to the outpost, Ren knew it would test everyone. Large rocks blocked the path, sharp edges threatened every step, and the low gravity made it easy to slip. Most of the volunteers were already tired, their movements slower and unsteady. Bren grunted in frustration as he struggled to lift his last crate. Tom, however, moved forward steadily. He adjusted his load carefully, watching every step. When he reached Bren, he slowed, guiding him and supporting his arms. "You can do this," he said simply, not as a command, but as encouragement. Ren watched, and for the first time, she felt admiration bloom alongside her pride. The human was not just enduring, he was leading in his own way. He was showing that true strength was more than size or power, it was patience, endurance, and the ability to help others without complaint. Finally, they reached the outpost. The crates were stacked, the supplies secured, and the volunteers collapsed beside the stone walls. Exhausted but victorious, Ren sank to the ground, leaning against a rock, breathing heavily. She glanced at Tom, who stood quietly nearby, checking the ropes and straps of the last crate. He was tired, yes, but he showed no sign of weakness beyond normal effort. Ren rose slowly and approached him. Her steps were careful. Her pride made her hesitate, but she knew she had to speak. You were right," she said, her voice steady but full of sincerity. "I judged you too quickly. I thought your size made you weak. I thought you could not endure. But I see now, humans have a strength we cannot always measure." Tom looked at her calmly, as if he had expected her words. "It is not about being the strongest or the biggest," he said. "It is about continuing when others stop. It is about helping when others fall. That is how humans survive." Ren nodded slowly. For the first time, she did not feel pride in her own strength. Instead, she felt respect, deep and unshakable. She realized that she had learned something valuable, not just about humans, but about herself. True strength was endurance, patience, and the will to continue when everything seemed impossible. She extended her hand to Tom. I respect you," she said simply. "You have taught me more than I expected." Tom smiled faintly and shook her hand. "And you have taught me too," he said. "Strength comes in many forms. You have helped me carry, guided me in ways your people may not understand, and protected the group. We have both learned something." Ren felt warmth in her chest, a strange but comforting feeling. She had expected rivalry, laughter, and prideful competition. Instead, she found understanding and respect. The human had not only endured physically, but had shown the value of patience, quiet determination, and helping others. That night, as they camped outside the outpost, Ren sat near the fire, watching Tom repair a torn strap on his pack. Bren was already asleep, exhausted beyond words. Ren looked at Tom and realized something important. She had begun to see humans not as weak, but as capable, resilient, and extraordinary in their own way. She whispered softly to herself, as if admitting it for the first time, "Humans are stronger than I knew. Not in size, but in will. Not in speed, but in endurance. I was wrong to laugh at him." Tom looked up at her, sensing her thoughts, and simply nodded with his calm smile. No words were needed. Respect had been earned, and Ren felt it deeply. The lesson was clear. Strength was not measured only by muscle, size, or speed. True power was the ability to endure, to continue when others falter, and to help those around you without seeking praise. And in that moment, Ren knew she would never underestimate a human again. The sun rose slowly over the jagged rocks of the asteroid field, painting the sky with pale gold. The air was thin and cold, and the rocky surface beneath their boots seemed endless. Yet today felt different. The mission was nearly complete, and the long days of struggle had changed more than just muscles and endurance. Ren tightened the straps of her crate, feeling the ache in her arms, but also a quiet strength in her chest. She glanced at Tom, who stood nearby, checking the ropes of his own load. He moved with the same calm precision as always, his lean frame carrying the supplies steadily. Without rush or complaint, Ren could not help but smile slightly. She had learned much from him over the past week. She had laughed at him, doubted him, even mocked his size. But now, she understood that strength was more than muscle. True strength was endurance, patience, and the will to keep moving when others faltered. "Are you ready?" she asked quietly. Tom looked up, his calm expression unchanged. "Always," he replied. "Let's finish this." The path to the outpost was the most dangerous yet. Jagged rocks jutted like teeth, cracks ran deep, and the low gravity made balance difficult. Ren carried a heavy crate, Brent struggled with two smaller ones, and Tom carried his usual load. Yet he paused now and then to help others, adjusting their balance or steadying the crates. Hours passed, the team moved steadily, facing obstacles with focus and determination. Ren felt herself pushing harder, inspired by Tom's quiet endurance. She helped Bren over sharp rocks, guided weaker volunteers, and adjusted her own steps carefully. Remembering the lesson she had learned, strength was not only in power, but in persistence and support. By midday, they reached a wide, unstable plateau. A misstep here could send someone sliding into the cracks below. Ren carefully set her crate down and looked for the best path. She saw Tom moving ahead, his eyes scanning the rocks, finding the safest route. Without thinking, she followed him, trusting his judgment. They moved as a team, Ren and Tom leading, Bren and the others following. Each step was careful, precise, and steady. The plateau was treacherous, but together they crossed it without incident. When they finally reached the base of the outpost, the crates were heavy, but their burden felt lighter. Ren set hers down with relief. Breathing deeply, she looked at Tom, who had already arranged his own supplies and had helped Bren with the last few crates. He stood calmly, his face calm, eyes clear and focused. Even after a long day, Ren approached him, feeling a sense of respect and gratitude she had never felt for anyone before. You are remarkable," she said quietly, "not because of your size or your strength, but because you endure. You keep going when others cannot, and you help those around you." Tom looked at her, a faint smile on his face. "It is not remarkable," he said simply. "It is survival, and it is respect for others. We all depend on each other. That is why we keep going." Ren nodded. She realized that he was teaching her something deeper than endurance. He was teaching her about partnership, about relying on one another, and about the value of steady effort over pride or speed. That evening, as they set up camp near the outpost, Ren sat beside the fire, her body exhausted but her mind alive with reflection. She looked at Tom, who quietly tended to his supplies and adjusted the ropes of the last crate. He worked with care, showing patience even in the smallest actions. "You have taught me much," Ren said, her voice low, "not just about humans, but about strength, patience, and endurance. I am grateful." Tom looked up and nodded. "And you have taught me too," he said. "Strength comes in many forms. You are strong, brave, and willing to push beyond what you thought possible. We have both learned from each other." Ren felt warmth in her chest. For days, she had doubted him, mocked him, and underestimated him. But now, she knew better. The human was not weak. He was not just enduring for himself, but for the team. And that, she realized, made him stronger than any display of muscle could ever be. Over the next day, they completed the final part of their mission. Crates were delivered, supplies were secured, and the outpost was fully stocked. The volunteers gathered, exhausted but proud. Ren looked around and saw the difference Tom had made. His steady pace, calm focus, and willingness to help had inspired the team to push through when they might have given up. When the officer approached, he looked at the group with approval. "You have done well," he said. "This mission would have failed without the teamwork and endurance I have seen." Special recognition goes to the human. Tom bowed slightly, his calm smile modest. Ren felt a surge of respect. She stepped forward beside him. He is not just remarkable for humans, she said, her voice firm. He is remarkable for anyone. His endurance, patience, and care have taught us all something important. I am proud to have worked with him. The officer nodded, impressed by her words. Tom gave a small, respectful bow to Ren. And I am proud to have worked with you, he said. As the group prepared to leave the asteroid field, Ren walked beside Tom, feeling something she had never expected: admiration, respect, and trust. She had begun the journey thinking him weak, small, and unworthy of her attention. Now, she saw him as a partner, a teacher, and a friend. The sun set over the jagged rocks, casting long shadows across the ground. Ren and Tom sat together, quietly watching the sky. The long days of hardship had ended, but the lessons they had learned would remain forever. Ren turned to him and smiled. I have learned more from you than I could have imagined, not just about humans, but about myself. I hope we can work together again. Tom smiled back, calm and steady as always. We will. Endurance, patience, and care, these are strengths we can share, and together we can accomplish much more. For the first time, Ren felt a true sense of partnership. She had begun the mission mocking him, doubting him, and judging him unfairly. But now, she saw the human not as someone to ridicule, but as someone to respect, to learn from, and to trust. The stars above glimmered in the dark sky. The asteroid field stretched endlessly around them, dangerous and beautiful. And Ren knew one thing clearly: humans were not defined by size, strength, or appearance. They were defined by endurance, patience, and the will to keep moving forward. And in that truth, Ren found a new kind of strength, a strength she had never felt before, a bond that could last far beyond any challenge, and a respect that would endure for the rest of her life.